What's up everyone, I hope you're well. Just wanted to do a very quick video on 3 things that I believe will make you a great guitar player. I'm not going to be talking about things like speed being a byproduct of accuracy, where you play slow and get it right to build up your speed, because I think that's a given, or things like being in tune, using decent gear, all of that kind of stuff. I've seen a few guitar players that do this incredibly well. A few good friends of mine are extremely good at this. And I've seen a lot of players that technically have certain things down and they've been playing for a long time and maybe they're writing incredible music, but when it comes to something about their guitar playing just doesn't sound as good as what it could do. So I got my thinking hat on and I thought of these 3 things. So number 1 is vibrato. Vibrato is when the note is slightly bent and returned back to its kind of starting place, if you will. This can be done quickly or slowly, but it adds a character, it adds a flavor to the note that you're playing. We can make it sound like this, or like this, or like this, where we get rhythmic. So practice this with a simple lick. Just choose, maybe 1 or 2 notes and see what you can come up with. You might literally pick it up and your go-to vibrato style is quite quick and shallow, or it could be quite slow but also deep. Be sure to try this out in a couple of different places on the neck, particularly when the frets get smaller as you go towards the body, and also try this out on different places, different strings on the fretboard. What you'll find is for the lower strings you'll need to bend the note down because you don't have any fretboard space to move it upwards, and for the higher strings you'll need to bend upwards as opposed to down. So get used to what you need to do differently with your hands in order to be able to get your sound and your vibrato on any string. Some top tips: I recommend using as many fingers as you can. So your index finger tends to be your pointing finger, and it's the one that we use with all of our phones and to press buttons on the lift and anything else that we need to point at. So that's particularly strong out of all of our fingers, followed by the second finger, the middle finger there. But your ring finger and your pinky finger especially tend to be a little bit weaker than the other 2. Give them some reinforcement. If you're playing a note on, let's say, the 7th fret of the D string, stick these 2 behind it. If we're playing an A pentatonic, 2 of those 5 notes are not using the index finger, so give this one some backup and this one some backup. Reinforce it with these other fingers that you've got available. If you don't do that, then it seems inefficient. I mean, they're hanging around anyway, so you may as well put them to good use. This is going to make sure that you don't have to try particularly hard in order to get the sound that you want. Also, make sure that you're returning back to the original pitch. We want to sound controlled, we want to sound confident, we don't want to sound uncontrolled and like we're just trying to blag our way through something, because that will just sound terrible. But at first, that might be what it sounds like. But use your ears and listen to the great guitar players that you really admire and check out how they're approaching vibrato. So for number 2, accurate bends. There is nothing worse than hearing someone playing a lead guitar part or playing a solo and their bend is just not quite hitting the note that it needs to be, or it's overbending and it's sharpening the note that they want to hit. So practice doing some unison bends, and this is where we take, for instance, the G string. We'd also play the note that's on the B string but 2 frets down, and we'll use that as a reference point and then bend upwards until you can hear the notes ringing together in unison. What you'll hear is there'll be like this wavering sound or warbling sound. As you bend it into tune, that warbling sound will start to slow down until the notes are singing together. And then as you release it back down again, it will start to speed up and go crazy. For the B string, the high B string, you can use the reference note that is on the E string, but this time 3 notes down. Practice with this and get used to bending up and always hitting the note that you want to hit. And then once you've got that spot on, try speeding it up or slowing it down so it's really controlled. And then you've got even more variation into the way that you could play a bend. You can also try pre-bending the note, and this is where we bend the note up to where we want it to be and then hit the string and then release it, which has got a particular sound. And for extra character, you can do bending and the vibrato that we were talking about before. So add some vibrato to almost to the top of the bend as a little sprinkle on top of what you're doing. And number 3, and this one I find particularly with guitar players that don't really play much through valve amps, or they spend a lot of time playing through, you know, modeling gear or emulation gear on a laptop, for instance, is it's very easy to dial in as much gain as you want and change the volumes afterwards. But what this means is that we're not really approaching it with our hands. We're not approaching it as a player. We're just knowing that we can fix it in post-production, which when you go to live or you're playing through a big classic valve amp, that picking or that attack that you've got is not going to sound good, or it's going to sound quite monotonous. So think of it this way: the attack or the dynamics in your playing, if you don't have any, then there's no variation in what you're playing. Sure, you might play notes quicker or slower, but it's the same as me talking in a monotone voice like this. Yes, there's different lengths of notes and I could speed it up or slow it down, but really it's the same constant way of hitting my notes with my voice. But what I'm actually doing is adding some extra emphasis to certain words, or I'm even bringing it down a little bit when I'm talking. Think of that as adding like an extra dimension to the notes that you're playing. Instead of it just being one volume all of the time, let's say that that's your normal picking and you're always hitting, as you hit a note, it goes up to that volume and then that's it. Well, what about if you hit it harder and you get it to go really high, or you spend a little bit of time with it quietly and then you pick out notes. So that variation is going to make you sound like you know exactly what you're doing. You're able to add more character and more flavor into what you're playing, and ultimately able to express yourself as a player even more. One of the ways that you can practice your dynamics is unplug your electric guitar or pick up an acoustic guitar, because there's no volume or gain that you can play around with afterwards, or there's nothing that you're relying on other than your hands. If I want to make an acoustic guitar sound louder, well, I got to hit it harder. If I want to bring it down and make it quieter, or hit the notes softer, that gives me a different sound. Apply that to a valve amp, through a really big rig, or even just through really great modeling software. It's going to open up a whole other realm of possibilities as to how you can play the note. So if you're great at vibrato and you've got your own vibrato sound, you can bend accurately, and you can mess around with and use the full extent of the dynamics that are available using your picking hand. Then they're the 3 things that I believe, if you get that nailed, whether you play quickly or slowly in any style, that's going to make you sound like a great guitar player. We'll see you again next time. Peace!